sir. We agree on that.
Everybody's moved the flags since they're more central. Good evening. You all good? Okay. As I said, I'm happy. Happy. Check the old time here. 6:58. I'm trying to remember what all I forgot.
Did I enable that?
How's Sunday looking good?
Yeah. All right, that's what I said. We meet with Greg Moore.
Oh,
okay,
so I'll manage it.
And talk through, and we're well on our way. There's not a lot of ends to try to like. Under the store. I'll have to do
So for my piece is just a welcome on behalf of the city. Okay. Just wanted to, very good. Very good.
Stay.
Oh, yeah. It's my ambition. But it's Will Dudley showed up at the Martin Luther King's like, so where do we sit and what do I say? And I said, well, brevity is better. And he got up and spoke for 10 minutes. Well, he had prepared some excellent, but it was, a professorial presentation. You know how that can
I
go.
guess I'll be listening.
Count your blessings. Yes. Yes. Keep my paper straight. Best I can. Curious, I feel like most of these ladies are here.
Master plan.
Okay, yeah. Be better. That would be better. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the June 16th edition of the Lexington City Council meeting. Glad you're all here. If you have any trouble hearing, please let us know. It's our intention to be clear and transparent and share with you all information and encourage members of council as well as anyone speaking to council this evening to be sure to speak into the microphone. With the meeting called to order, I'd ask you all to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. Next item on the agenda is consideration of the agenda. I'm not aware of any changes or modifications. And unless there's an objection, we will approve it as presented and move straight into presentations. I'd like to call on Eric Wilson for a moment in history, which we've been doing for some time now through Zoom and COVID and now in person. And teeing things up for what will prove to be an exciting weekend and celebrating Juneteenth.
Thank you, Janie and council. Hello, good to see you. Yes, again, my name is Eric Wilson. I direct the Rockbridge Historical Society, and it's been great working with you all really over the past almost exactly a year ago on some dimensions of this project. The sign that you see at the right will be formally dedicated this Sunday at 1:30. That came through the decisions of council, your support of the schools, the leadership of Lexington City Schools. And particularly we'll have some participation among you. Mayor Friedman will be giving welcoming remarks. Vice Mayor Alexander's threaded throughout the day. Councilman Sigler's been very helpful in bumping out some of these activities through RARO. We thank the board there for doing that. Just going to give you a quick overview of some of those and really build toward one quote at the end that touches on the word I've flagged here, reconnection. Juneteenth is generally associated with emancipation, and rightly so. It's generally associated with concepts of freedom, more broadly, and rightly so, and opportunity. But increasingly, there have been a number of ways in which scholars and communities and public events are talking about the idea not just of connection, but reconnection, and ways in which that lies deep in the holidays' origins. So we'll build to that. What you see here is the Juneteenth flag. It's not, it hasn't been especially visible in 25 years. Now it's growing rapidly in the ways that Juneteenth ceremonies themselves are growing rapidly, and in important ways as a complement to some of the traditional symbols and iconography that we'll see. As it's stated, the symbols of the American flag and the colors are central to this, centrally to emphasize that enslaved and emancipated Americans and descendants are fully American. In the reach of that flag, you can see the arc of a horizon there, symbolizing a horizon opportunity. The central star is a nod both toward Texas. I know we've got some Texas ties here in the Lone Star State, but also now it fully reaches to all 50 states, and that's important. And then the Nova, which they've called that the Nova, the starburst, signaling that new sense of opportunity. I believe this flag will be raised at Glasgow this weekend. You may have seen that in the paper this week, but it's an important, I think, civic statement for Juneteenth. These are other kinds of traditions and symbols and signals that are associated, whether those are foods, colors, clothing, all sorts of kinds of things. So bridging the cultural and the civic, I think, is a good, timely thing for us to consider. Here are some thumbnails on the events in Glasgow. I'm not directly involved in that, but we've tried to coordinate different elements of that this year. There's an important educational component there as well, in the dedication of Glasgow's community center for the former principal of Glasgow Elementary School when it was a segregated school. And I see several heads nodding because he continued to be well known in the community. I believe that his son will be one of the people introducing him. And both in the afternoon, and then maybe it's a heat break in the middle, though I think weather will be cooler. There will be another series of events that evening. In yellow for people online, or here you can see a full listing of events. Here in Lexington, we will lead the day's activities with the dedication of the signs. Two school alumni from, I believe, the 1940s and 50s class. One was a teacher here, Ms. Louise Michael. One became a very prominent professor at VCU in public policy, Dr. Blue Eagle Wooldridge. And there will also be a singing of the school song. So we expect you all to be there in your SATB range and contribute. Other musical activities, choirs, and a real commitment this year on our groups to have local Black businesses involved in vendors. We didn't have that element last year, and we're excited to be able to enjoy those products and showcase the people. I won't name all these, but I do want them in the record, and I want people to see how broad the reach of involvement was here. And again, there are reasons why the city of Lexington and the city schools are at the top, hosting and site in and at the schools that really opened up a lot of things this year to be able to do that in the center of the Green Hill and Diamond Hill communities. So the last quote comes from Dr. Annette Gordon-Reed. She's known to many as one of the preeminent historians of slavery in America. and particularly at Monticello. She's a law professor. And last year, she wrote this book on Juneteenth. It's quite a slim book, and it's mostly about Texas and growing up in Texas. It's a memoir in many ways. Encourage reading it. But this morning I saw an interview that she gave. You know, she's on tap all week, all year, really. The interview closed with this reflection, and I was compelled by it generally, and I was compelled by it because I think it speaks to a lot of the things that are happening here. People asked, you know, what advice do you have about creating authentic Juneteenth celebrations and gatherings? She says, I've recommended that families encourage young people to interview older members of their family about their lives. This is in keeping with the family theme of many Juneteenth celebrations. And it's important to note, Henry Louis Gates has noted this among others, that the early Juneteenth celebrations, opportunities, that time of year were crucial for the actual reunion of families that had been sold apart, torn by war. So this idea of coming together as families and communities and creating new families was key. The enslaved who were freed knew they had a struggle ahead of them, but they were happy that it would no longer be legal to sell family members away from one another, one of the many searing atrocities of slavery. I don't think it's a coincidence that Juneteenth has always been about gathering family and community together. Everyone of any race can do that. Juneteenth is a day that all consider the importance of advancing human rights in the largest reach. So we'll let that marinate. We'll see you on Saturday and Sunday. Thank you again for your leadership and care.
Eric, thank you for being with us and for detailing those opportunities for folks to celebrate Juneteenth and come together as community. Look forward to participating in those.
There is basketball contest with free Nike basketball shoes on offer. There's U13 and I think it says 14 and up. And I'm not sure we capped that, but we'll see how your game is.
Excellent. Lots of fun and good community activities, and looking forward to those and this weekend. Next item on the agenda is public hearings. We have public hearing 6.1 for consideration of Washington Lee's request for an approval of an update to their campus master plan. We had items A, B, and C. Unless there's any objection by council or council, would ask that we take care of all those at one time. And we have 3 members of council who, due to affiliations with Washington Lee, have recused themselves from this topic. I'd ask them to step down as they will not be participating in the discussion nor the vote related to this. I'd like to call on Arnie Glazer, our planning director, to introduce this item. We will have Arnie's report, any statements from our applicant, and then I'll open the public hearing again for all 3 A, B, and C items under 6.1. Arnie?
Good evening to you all. City Council is asked to review 3 requests submitted by Washington Lee University. Development on the W&L campus is governed by a campus master plan, and any property to be considered in a campus master plan must first be rezoned to the institutional overlay district. Any rezoning of property must also be in conformance with the city's comprehensive plan. W&L is specifically requesting, first of all, a comprehensive plan amendment for 12 Lee Avenue to change the future land use designation from downtown center to the civic campus post future land use designation, because the requested institutional overlay zoning district is not consistent with the existing downtown center future land use designation. The second request is to rezone 6 parcels to the institutional overlay zoning district. And the third request is an amendment to the campus master plan for the entire campus. The main consequence of updating the campus master plan is the addition of 11 requested capital projects. Washington and Lee amended their initial application, and the triangle properties were removed from the rezoning request. The request to close McLaughlin Street for aerial dance performances was withdrawn. The reprioritization of one-way traffic along West Washington Street was withdrawn, and a revised proffer statement was provided for your consideration. That proffer statement is on page 41 of your staff report. Staff recommends that all 3 public hearings be open together, which you've already done. You take the testimony of all three. And then when you get to your decision points for the comprehensive plan amendment, rezonings, and the master plan, we would recommend that you do that in that order because the comprehensive plan or the rezoning requires a comprehensive plan. And to go back the other way, the campus master plan requires the rezonings. So if you would start with, when you get to that point, if it's this evening or another evening, if you would start with the the comprehensive plan, then the rezonings, and then the campus master plan.
Arnie, be sure to pull that microphone.
Little
Just
closer.
make sure folks at home and as well in the audience can hear you.
The institutional district, which is Article 7 of the zoning ordinance, was designed to allow larger scale institutional uses such as universities and medical campuses to develop in accord with master plans approved by city council. By approval of a master plan, council pre-authorizes various land uses that are described and located within the area incorporated within a master plan. Land uses not shown and described by the master plan can only be approved through the issuance of a conditional use permit by city council after review and recommendation by planning commission, or by the update of the campus master plan, which again is a planning commission review and recommendation and a council approval at public hearings. The institutional district is intended to function as an overlay district, meaning that the application of the overlay district on property does not result in a change of the underlying zoning district or the regulations that may be derived from the underlying or base zoning district. As an example, if a property is zoned R1 as the underlying zone district and it has an institutional overlay that is implemented with the approved master plan, the uses that are allowed on this parcel are the underlying R1 permitted uses, as well as the uses that are allowed in the institutional overlay, and then specifically what's allowed or approved by you through the campus master plan for that particular parcel. We had the question a number of times through the public hearing process, and a subsequent owner does not have free reign over the development of a parcel that is included in a master plan. Most of the W&L campus has a base zoning district of R1, but there are also properties on campus that are C1 and RLC. Development standards such as building height, lot area, lot width, setback, and parking requirements may be proposed as part of a submitted master plan request. If development standards are not proposed and approved as part of a master plan, the development standards applicable to the underlying zone district shall apply. W&L did propose development standards for 4 of the capital projects, and those are outlined in the proffer statement and also mentioned in your staff report. Site plans are required for new development approved within a master plan. And if the new development is within 200 feet of a public street or within 200 feet of a boundary of the area included within the master plan, city council must approve the site plan. That is the only instance where city council reviews and approves site plans. Your staff report includes the strategies from the comprehensive plan that are specifically directed to W&L and to other institutions, admittedly, that are for your consideration. Your staff report also includes a review of the 11 individual capital projects proposed by W&L, as well as a review of the proposed rezoning and comprehensive plan amendments. I won't cover all of those individually, but I'm certainly available for any questions. To assist with your deliberation this evening, staff provided an addendum, or what will be internally called a cheat sheet. It is an Appendix D of your staff report. That addendum summarizes each of the capital projects, provides decision points for each of those, includes the relevant proffer statement language for each of the capital projects, and provides the planning commission recommendation for each of those. During council's deliberation on the 3 requests, please keep in mind the direction provided in section 420-7.6 B 1 and 2 is found on the top of page 6 of your staff report. And if we could go there just quickly,
Page 6, Arnie.
page 6.
Thank you.
So I'm on the upper part of that. So it's the section 420-7.6. It says action by planning commission and amendments. So per our zoning ordinance in the institutional overlay specifically says planning commission shall consider the following things. It doesn't say the same for city council, but I would suggest that you use those same criteria in your evaluation, such as if you find that the development shown on the master plan is in compliance with the requirements of the institutional districts and other applicable provisions of this chapter, that such development will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare or unduly injurious to property values or improvements in the neighborhood, and will not be in conflict with the policies and principles of the city's adopted comprehensive plan, and that adequate public services are or reasonably will be available, you should approve. Otherwise, the commission can disapprove the plan. So those would be the criteria that I would point you to. All of the written comments that were submitted by the public from the February 24th Planning Commission public hearing, the April 14th Planning Commission public hearing, and the May 12th Planning Commission public hearing, including a few comments that were submitted during a Planning Commission meeting on the 26th of May, were all brought forward and included in Appendix C of your meeting packet. We ask that if speakers have comments in written form, if you could please submit those to Jamie, so it would be a little bit easier for the minutes to be composed. That's all the comments I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Arnie. Members of council have any questions for staff? Very good. I want to take a moment to thank Arnie and the Planning Commission for a very thorough review. We'll point out some folks have made inquiry. Arnie works for the city. He is a Washington Lee graduate, and he does not have any conflicts of interest in dealing with this issue. Want to be sure to put that to rest. And that's evidenced by the incredibly thorough 143-page report from staff dealing with this issue. Washington Lee, gentlemen, do you all wish to make any comments? If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Tom Kolaski with Washington and Lee, resident of the county. First, I'd like to thank you folks for the opportunity for the working session. I wasn't able to be here, but as we found with the Planning Commission, there's a good opportunity for some open dialogue, and also thank staff. I mean, the amount of work that went into preparing the report, and especially some of the items that help us digress through those. I think not only the public, but also council members have had an opportunity to see the plan. Over the last 4 months, we've had plenty of opportunity to have some open dialogue. And we've responded to that. As Arnie mentioned, the plan that we put forth back in February is different than the one that is being put forth today for consideration. We've withdrawn a number of things in response to public comment, as well as prepared the proffer, which states some of our intents there. So I wasn't going to go through all 11 projects or the rezonings or things like that, but more than happy to answer questions that you may have.
Terrific. Thank you for being here. We missed you at our work session. Steve McAllister did a fine job representing, but said that you were a far better presenter, but he did the best he could. The members of council have any questions for the applicant?
I do have one question. It was something that was pointed out to me, and I don't think it was brought up during the Planning Commission hearings. In the initial master plan, the Institutional History Museum, there's a section that says that part of that building would be devoted to academic classrooms. So, one, I guess I'd like clarification on how much of that building would be devoted to classrooms and who actually would use those classrooms.
We like to use the term teaching and learning spaces,
Okay.
and those take the various forms. Our museum on campus, we look at that as a learning space or classroom. We have not started programming that building yet, but there is, with most of our buildings, there's always a teaching and learning component or opportunity within those buildings. And it would not only be for the W&L community, but we also see that Institutional History Museum as being a learning space for the community.
So you're saying that regular classes would not likely occur there. I mean,
It'll be scheduled through our registrars, but it's not like it's going to be the basic class all the time.
okay.
But as I mentioned, we're use all of our facilities for learning opportunities.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you give an example of facilities that you use in that capacity or that may the public may be taking advantage of or utilizing?
Actually, our museum, the Reeves Center, is a good example of where we have teaching and learning in there, and it's open to the community.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions from council? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate you being here. At this time, I'd like to, at 7:22, open the public hearing for this issue with the Washington Lee Campus Master Plan. Have a few people that have signed up, and if you did not sign up, it doesn't mean you can't speak. And we'll call on you at the end. But first, we call on Susan Miner. And Lisa Tracy, you're on deck. Ms. Miner, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman and members of the City Council, my name is Susan Miner, and I reside at 203 Ross Road. I am here this evening in my capacity as a board member of Historic Lexington Foundation. Since HLF President Larry Weiss and I addressed separate meetings of the Planning Commission concerning the Washington and Lee University plan, the university has made several revisions to its original master plan, based in part on public opposition, including removing the request to make a portion of West Washington Street one-way and plans to develop the McLaughlin Triangle for upper-class student housing. We appreciate their willingness to make these changes. W&L officials have repeatedly stated that many of the elements of the master plan are conceptual only. And as others have stated, this is more a vision than a plan. Many of the proposals in the master plan are many years in the future. As such, we urge the City Council and city officials not to rush into approving the master plan. Our largest concerns relate to provisions in the master plan for proposed demolition and new construction on Lee Avenue and West Washington Street. It is critical that the city not remove setback and height restrictions planned for new buildings facing those streets. To do otherwise would negatively impact the scale and character of Lexington's downtown historic district. With regard to the McLaughlin Triangle, we would note that the university has now recognized that a number of the homes up there have condition problems. As long as the university plans to own and utilize these homes, it's imperative that the university address these conditions and make necessary repairs. We thank City Council for having this hearing and for the chance for citizens and organizations like HLF to express our concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Miner. Appreciate you being with us, and thank you for your service to HLF. Lisa Tracy, come on up, and in the bullpen is Elizabeth Betch.
Good evening, and thank you for being here with us tonight and letting us talk with you. I don't have any prepared remarks. I've spoken before to the Planning Commission, but I just wanted to say that it's been my observation about Washington and Lee that like VMI, it's a small liberal arts college that has to constantly be offering new and better things to potential students and donors. And so for that reason, these capital improvements that they're recommending are quite understandable. But I think our concern in this community is that they have not really taken the community into account as much as we could hope. We do really appreciate that they've listened to the community about such elements as the Nelson Street Quadrangle and Washington Street. I think we're all still really concerned about Lee Avenue for a number of reasons. One of them is the impact that the kind of building that's going to be going on would have on that block. We've already seen the cocoa mill moving out. We've already seen Lexington Mercantile is talking about selling and leaving. And I think that when you create uncertainty in a downtown area, it's really hard for the merchants to stay and feel secure. They have no way of knowing how all of this is going to turn out. I hope it turns out well. I have the feeling that the University Museum and Parking Deck project is somewhat inevitable at this point, but I could hope I'm wrong. I think that charm is something that is not easily defined, but I think that to institutionalize the kind of building that's going to be on the avenue could be a mistake. I think those odd buildings are charming. I know they belong to Washington and Lee, but I hope that we will all consider the effect of charm on our tourist trade and on our community as a whole. as someone who was a member of the ARB and also was a house mother at Washington Lee and has been a community member for quite a long time, I will say that Washington Lee, perhaps with the best of intentions, does not always keep its promises. If you wanted to know more about that, you could look at what happened with the Ann Smith building, and you could ask Arthur Bartenstein. I think he would probably remember more than I do about what went down at the ARB. So with no ill will toward Washington and Lee, I just wish that we could be sure that they would be more of a community member for all of us always, and not just when we're holding their feet to the fire. I would say that it would be a mistake to grant them the overlay and rezoning requests that they're making, and also the future land use designation, because the more you give them, the less control you will have over what they ultimately do, in spite of what they've promised. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for your insights as a local lady. Elizabeth Betch, and on deck is Charles Rappold.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Batch and I reside at 410 Honeysuckle Hill in Lexington. Thank you for another opportunity to speak. I'm thinking this may be the light at the end of the tunnel. Tonight, I'd like to make two further comments. First, regarding the height restrictions on the proposed admissions and financial aid building on the corner of Washington and Lee. The Planning Commission has accepted the proposed 50-foot height, which, as I understand it, is about 9 feet higher than is currently allowed. Given that the building site is on a hill, and any building higher than the currently allowed height will appear much higher due to the elevation of the site, the result will be an unnecessarily overwhelming, overbearing structure. Would you be able to explain to us the rationale behind this and why this new height may be accepted? Second is the question of the Museum of Institutional History and the accompanying parking garage. Given the problems that we have heard about the placement of the entrance and exits onto Lee Avenue, the additional traffic, buses, elimination of parking spaces on Lee Avenue, and lack of insured parking for the public in the garage, one question naturally arises. Is this site outside the confines of what one naturally thinks of as the university's main campus the most appropriate for this museum and garage? Would it not make more sense to keep these buildings on the main campus? For example, there is currently an informal museum area on the campus with the Watson Gallery leading down to the Reeve Center, which leads down to the University Chapel. We understand that the chapel will no longer serve as a museum, but there is ample space on Letcher Avenue where the office of the museum director is currently located. How appropriate it would be if, as one entered the city on Route 11, just past the VMI monolithic corridor, one could see a beautiful Washington and Lee museum set back at the corner. The added benefit is that it would be viewed from both sides, adding to its architectural dignity. And there is ample space in that area of the campus for additional parking. Or perhaps a new creative museum building next to Liberty Hall ruins, the most historical of university sites. In either case, it seems the university has a real opportunity to create something special that will attract visitors without disrupting the community. I also would like to thank members of both the commission, council, and staff for their careful attention to and deliberation of this master plan, as well as our friends at the university for their responsiveness to community concerns and questions as the process moved along. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Charles Rappold, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Charles Rappold. My family and I live at 110 West Preston Street. So we look out our window every day, look down Lee Avenue. We are very concerned about the aspects of the WNL master plan as it relates to Lower Lee Avenue. We feel that the financial aid and admissions building on one side of the avenue, the Institutional History Museum and the parking facility on the other are going to create a canyon-like atmosphere in that part of the city. We think that it's going to diminish the charm of downtown Lexington. We think it's going to hurt the perspective of Grace Episcopal Church. If I were a congregant at Grace Episcopal, I would not like to come out of church every Sunday and see those two buildings there. Although we heard earlier that WNL has withdrawn its request for turning Washington Street into a one-way avenue, my recollection is that at the last meeting, they simply said they may come back in the future and ask the council to reconsider that. I think turning Washington Street into a one-way avenue would be a disaster for the city. It would merely increase the traffic on Nelson. And I don't understand how we can get by with basically one major two-way street, east-west, in downtown Lexington. As our prior speaker just indicated, it seems to me that the two buildings that are proposed to be constructed on Lee, admissions and financial aid, institutional history and parking, are not critical to the academic activities of WNL. I don't know why they can't be constructed on the back campus where there's a considerable amount of open space, where I think they could be quite attractive and be an attraction for students and visitors to Lexington. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for sharing your perspectives. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this topic this evening? Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:33 and ask for council's thoughtful consideration. Mr. Alligood.
I would like to make a strong point about how much I appreciate the work that the Planning Commission and staff has done on this matter. They have really done the heavy lifting, and I can't imagine the city council repeating that and being as efficient as it was. How many meetings there were and how many public comments there were. I can't express my appreciation enough for the work that the Planning Commission did. With regard to the WNL proposal, I would like to move that in the application by WNL to change the future land use designation for 12 Lee Avenue from downtown center to civic / campus / post. I move to deny the request to amend the comprehensive plan to change the future land use designation for 12 Lee Avenue.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. And thank you, Mr. Alligood. And Ms. Alexander for the second. Any further discussion?
I think it might be instructive to talk about why we're denying that for a little bit, to give
Certainly.
some guidance to folks. I think the public comments we heard tonight were very instructive, and I agree with much of what was said. I do think that an institutional history museum could be a good thing, not only for Washington Lee, but also for the city of Lexington in terms of tourism, bringing people to the downtown area. So I do think that's a good idea. I do question whether that's the best location for it, as others have mentioned. My concern with 12 Lee Avenue and the parking deck is, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but when I go somewhere to go to a parking structure, if there's a free spot on the street with no meter, I'm going to park there. And so what that's going to mean is that Lee Avenue, all of that parking is going to be gone. Not just the parking, that you have to cut away for the entrance, but everything. And so that's a real, I don't see how we get past that, unfortunately, for Washington and Lee. I just don't think it makes sense for the city to do that. But if there really can't, if we can't find some other location for that parking within the existing institutional overlay, I do wonder if maybe the city and university could maybe partner with something to create a parking structure that's actually open to the public, and maybe some portion of it's reserved to Washington and Lee, but at least it would be open to the public, and that would help offset our future parking needs for downtown Lexington. And that may be a way over this hump, but without that, I do find it very hard to imagine where a planning commission and city council would approve that parking deck. And so I guess that's what I want to say on that.
Thank you, sir. I think it's important to also identify that that was the recommendation from Planning Commission
Yes.
was denial of this request.
Absolutely.
And to pile on, that area continues to be an opportunity for commercial activity in part of the downtown business district. Whether Washington Lee owns it or not, it has that designation. And I'm mindful that once upon a time, Washington Lee owned the Troubadour Theater, which now is a thriving business. Washington Lee found it wasn't in their best interest to own that and put on the market and sold it. And it's now a productive business downtown. So I do see them as a good neighbor and one that's working to help ensure the integrity of downtown when possible. And just like to remind all of us of that step. But unless there's any further discussion, I'd have a call for the question. Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Relative to item B. Ask for council's consideration.
In regard to item B, that would be RZ 2022-02. An application by Washington and Lee to rezone multiple properties owned by the university to the I-1 institutional overlay district. This is a two-part motion. I move to approve the rezoning of 220, 218, 216 West Washington Street and one unaddressed adjacent parcel, as well as the rezoning of only that portion of 223 McLaughlin Street encompassing the Wilson Hall and parking area existing footprint to the I-1 institutional overlay district. The next part, I move to deny the request to rezone 12 Lee Avenue to the I-1 institutional overlay.
I think this one also merits a little discussion before we vote.
I'll take that as a second.
Oh, sorry. Yes, second. Yes.
I have a motion from Ms. Alexander, a second from Mr. Ayers.
Yeah.
And discussion.
Yeah, I wanted to say, with respect to 223 McLaughlin Avenue, I think we need to be really parsimonious when it comes to expanding the institutional overlay. Our comprehensive plan makes it clear that we're to encourage Washington Lee to stay within their existing institutional overlay. And to do that, that means we have to not extend that further, and I won't say never, but we should be parsimonious at least. And so in this particular instance, I feel like that what we need to do for housekeeping is at least get Wilson Hall within the institutional overlay as it exists now. And so expanding the institutional overlay just to that footprint makes sense, not extending it eastward through the entire property. So that I'm comfortable with that approach.
Very good. Any further discussion? Hearing none, would ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And the last item is C.
Oh dear, this one's a long one. Okay, with respect to MPA 2022-02 Washington and Lee Campus Master Plan Update, I move to approve the capital improvements proposed in application MPA 2022-02 as follows, and there are 10 of them. Number one, approval of the partial conversion of the Leyburn Library to a teaching and learning center. 2, approval of the expansion of the Science Center and IQ Center. 3, approval of the renovation of Elrod Commons in addition to the dining facilities. 4, approval of the proposed back campus location for additional upper division housing in Lexington, and neither approval nor denial of the location in Rockbridge County. 5, approval of the new pedestrian bridge over Woods Creek. 6, approval of the admissions and financial center with a building height not to exceed 50 feet, a minimum setback of 34 feet to Washington Street, and subject to satisfactory review of a traffic study and related parking requirements to be provided by the applicant no later than submittal with a site plan review application. Number 7, approval of the Williams School expansion with a building height not to exceed 54 feet. 8, denial of the Wilson Hall expansion at this time due to a lack of sufficient detail. 9, denial of the master plan amendment as related to the Institutional History Museum and proposed parking deck due to a lack of sufficient detail. The applicant can present this project as a separate conditional use permit under the existing C1 zoning. And finally, number 10, neither approval nor denial of the softball field as its location is in Rockbridge County. And these approvals are made with the following conditions. 1, the uses and layout of the subject property shall be in substantial compliance with the campus master plan by Sasaki, date stamp March 18th, 2022, as amended with revised pages 84 through 85, and with the campus master plan proffer statement submitted on May 4th, 2022. And this master plan amendment does not authorize the exterior alteration of buildings, structures, or properties. Yes.
Good work.
Second.
As a motion and a second, thank you, Mr. Alligood. Any discussion?
Yeah, just a little. Mostly this sticks with the Planning Commission's recommendations, but the one divergence here is the Wilson Hall expansion. Because we made it pretty clear that a 6-foot setback was not worked there, and Washington Lee pulled that out of their proposal. We really don't have a clear sense of what that expansion is going to look like. I mean, how that expansion would work if indeed you're following the 25-foot setback, which was required with the residential light commercial there. So we didn't feel like we had enough clarity to agree to that. We fully expect Washington Lee will come back with a more refined proposal, and at that time, it quite likely, would be greeted more receptively. But right now, just because the way it was presented, it didn't feel as though initially, it didn't feel as though it took into consideration all of the people who live on the eastern side of town and travel McLaughlin every day in and out of town. I mean, that is a major thoroughfare, and it needs to remain a major thoroughfare and not turn into a university corridor. And that was the fear that would happen with that expansion. So for those reasons, we did depart from the Planning Commission's recommendations, and that accounts for this particular.
And I would just echo conversations with council members who are participating in this discussion and vote. Want to clearly articulate W&L is a great neighbor. We love you. We appreciate you and all that you bring to the community, but we do feel strongly about recognizing and honoring the borders that are in place. At least for me as a child, and I think for Miss Alexander, Washington Street was actually, for the most part, residential and Ann Smith School, and the Washington Lee campus kind of stopped at the Lee House. But it has jumped over Washington Street and taken over that swath of land. The institutional overlay and master plan, all the things working together to understand. But I think just to be very clear that the city council and the city wish for Washington Lee to continue to prosper within the confines of their existing border. You own property outside of the institutional overlay, have for years, and that's worked well, and still consider you a great neighbor and want to work together and continue to have conversations together. Personally, Tom, for your benefit, I'm sure you heard, but I'm lobbying for the museum to go in the corral area. It seems like that's a fantastic place. There's some historical pictures I'm glad to share with you of how that space was utilized. I think you can go down a little bit, add, have double deck parking there with a beautiful museum that's linked into the colonnade. I don't think it really blocks the view of the colonnade, my personal opinion. Steve suggested it may, but we want to see you continue to offer the programming to be one of the best liberal art colleges, universities in the entire country, or for that matter, the world. So thank you for the good work that you do in bringing these things. It's a process. I'd also say thank you specifically to the Planning Commission and the incredible exhaustive work that they did. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the citizenry who have participated and engaged. I would suggest that this is democracy and community in action. So thank you all for the vital role that all of you play. And with that, Council, you get the finishing role of a vote. So we have a motion, a second, unless there's any further discussion. Mr. Ayers,
Aye.
Mr. Alligood,
Aye.
Ms. Alexander.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much, and look forward to making additional progress as Washington Lee continues their work to be a great neighbor. Thank you all. As council returns to the dais, we need to continue our public hearing from June 2nd to receive comments relative to a purchase agreement for sale of the Spotswood site. I'd ask for any staff observations or details. I'm not really seeing any. We have the agreement. Just want to give you the opportunity. At this time, I would like to open the public hearing at 7:48. Molly McClure has signed up. Molly, and I didn't announce it previously, but you're probably familiar. We have our 3 minutes. I'm glad you're here and welcome. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, Molly McClure, 109 Rebel Ridge. Council, Mayor Friedman, good evening. I hope that each of you have read the written comment that I submitted earlier this week and wrote with the help of an experienced professional builder. I want to reinforce the suggestion I made in it that you consult an attorney specializing in real estate and construction before voting on whether to approve this agreement. It is disadvantageous in multiple ways to the city and deviates from standard industry practice. Critical terms, even the property designation, are left undefined, and there is no site plan or other submission that one would expect from an experienced builder. The overall timeline could run to 4 or 5 years, which is unusual, and the builder could delay its start indefinitely. There is nothing to keep the builder from flipping the title and project to an unsavory new buyer or leaving it half built. There are many other significant problems with this agreement, which could cost the city the entire purchase price or more. I commend you and I thank you, Council, for having taken your time with this proposal and for your transparency and having posted the text of it online recently. I urge you to now consult an attorney specializing in real estate and construction before taking the matter any further. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Molly. Appreciate you being here. And we did receive an email earlier this week, and that email and its contents will be part of our minutes. There, at 4:57 today, there was also a letter from Ben Grigsby. He's not able to attend in person and asked that his letter be read in tonight's public comment. I will not, as is our policy, read his letter into the public record, but his paragraphs and 10 points will be included in our minutes, and council will have the opportunity to has received that email as well. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this subject? Seeing no one jumping out of their seat, I will close the public hearing at 7:51 and ask for council's consideration.
Can we ask a few questions first?
Of course, or if we want to pursue a motion and have discussion, but if you have questions for staff, that's fine too.
Sure. Well, I'll go ahead and start by asking the city attorney a couple questions.
Sure.
So one of the comments that was just brought up that the builder could start the building and I guess sell it to somebody else. What does the contract say about if they don't build according to what we expect?
Well, I think there's a distinction there between sort of completing the project and then selling it, which there is no provision for that. That is possible. He could, or the developer could build it, finish it and sell it to someone else. But there is a provision that if during construction until the project is complete, that the city has to agree if Mr. Gaskin or Echelon Industries wants to assign it to some other entity that's not controlled by, I believe it says by name, Edwin Gaskin, then the city can refuse that assignment.
Thank you. And in Mr. Grigsby's letter, one of the things he commented on was that we say that the city will waive the utility connection fee.
Right.
And we had discussions before and have some backup documentation saying that Echelon's plan was to have one connection, but are we guaranteed of that within the contract?
I believe that's covered by under the seller's obligations, and Mr. Grigsby referenced subparagraph F. I think you need to read subparagraph F with subparagraph E. So subparagraph E is that the city has to verify that the water and wastewater system connections for the property are available at the property boundary and sufficient for the project. So the city's obligation is to say at the property line, the connections are there. Then you read F, waive any applicable utility tap or connection fees. Those are the tap or connection fees to that connection, the single connection at the property boundary.
Okay, just at that location, not at the building itself.
Correct.
And one other thing Mr. Grigsby did bring up in his letter was having a minimum number of apartments, which was actually something I brought up last time that this contract went through. But I think we're far enough along on this go round, and we know that Echelon's serious enough about the project and about maximizing the project that I personally don't see a need to put a minimum number of units like I did the first time around.
And as we've said before, there will be a site plan as part of their requirements to apply for a conditional use permit that will go through the planning commission. Will come back to council, that application process with a more detailed proposal. At that point in time, that's when we can address any concerns we might have in terms of the specific scope that they are proposing to build.
But that site plan doesn't have to be presented short term. There's like a year and a half before the site plan needs to become an official document. The way I read the thing, he's got time, and then he can buy an extension for it, which pushes it out to a year and a half. And it's part of his due diligence as well, where he can choose not to continue the project as well.
Right. Yeah, that's the reason for the study period is for him to be able to evaluate, and he could determine at the end of the study period or the extension, like you said, that it's not a viable project for whatever reason.
Or hopefully before
Right.
the timer runs out. Right.
Well, if there are no other comments, then I will make a motion to approve the contract as presented.
Thank you, Leslie.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers, for the second. Council discussion. Ms. Alexander.
Yes, I just want to comment that, when I received Mr. Grigsby's letter today, it gave me cause to make this comment that, as I've said before, I think that it would behoove us to develop a set of standards, policies and procedures when we enter into agreements like this, so that we have standards to go by, so that we're not deviating and going off on a tangent that there's no coming back from. I think that is very important for us to consider that at a future date.
specifically looking at perhaps a down payment amount, whether there's some criticism about 5,000 not being sufficient, whether 10% is appropriate. But if staff could look into that and perhaps come back to us with some recommendations for, if you will, procedure. I'm mindful that most contracts are unique and get negotiated out. And as we've learned from folks that we've worked with, consultants and economic development, it's about the terms. And so if we have a policy, we can certainly deviate from it, but if we have a policy, we can also embrace it. Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Mr. Alligood.
With regard to the process, one of the items that I have been approached by quite a few different people concerns the process that we followed in this particular project. In particular, one of the criticisms has been that we did it backwards, that we shouldn't have done the developer first and then decide on the project second. It should have been the project first, and then the developers would then bid on the project in there. In this particular instance, every time we had a hearing, the statement was made that we're merely picking the developer. And that was repeated every single time. And then we did pick the developer. And I'll say that I voted for that developer. And even on the night that I voted for that developer, the statement was also made again that we were merely picking the developer. And later we would determine the scope of the project. And lo and behold, it came to be known that after the developer was picked, that the developer took the position that the developer was going to be inflexible and it was going to be a single building. It was going to be a monolithic structure, and there was going to be no discussion about anything else. That process would not have happened. That result would not have happened had we determined the project first and then the developer second. So here we are. We're in the position now of voting for the contract. And I want to say that I have absolutely nothing against the Echelon Company or Mr. Gaskins. I have absolutely no complaint about those at all. It's just that the process has been backwards. And a long time ago, and I don't want to beat this horse too much, but I'll just mention it. There was considerable discussion about the cemetery property and the McCoy property, and that it really wasn't sufficiently tied up. And one night I kept referring to, if the conditions weren't within the four corners of the agreement, then there really wasn't any requirement for that property to always be cemetery property, even though it was given to the cemetery board. Well, this is the same property, and now we have the Rah-Rah building on it, and now we're getting ready to build apartments. And again, I have nothing against Echelon or Mr. Gaskins. It's just I find myself having been misled in this particular process. And I'm really disappointed in that. And I think we could have done it better. And hopefully we will do it better for the next one in there. How many pieces of property does the city have left to deal with? And the answer is one more in there. And so that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Mr. Alligood. Any other members of council? Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote. I'll remind council and the public that this does require a supermajority vote because it is transferring of property, and as a city, we're obligated by state code to have a supermajority. Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Sigler. Aye. Mr. Ayers.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
No.
Ms. Alexander.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-1. Thank you all. And I congratulate council on getting to the finish line, and it's long been at least 20 years that I'm aware of that city council has had in part of their comprehensive plan and strategic plan to develop this property as you're moving forward today. There was a failed attempt before, and I think that this will prove a positive and positive project for our entire community. Next item on the agenda are our council minutes from June 2nd work session and regular meeting. Those were included in your packet. And I would ask for council doesn't have any objection. It would let those stand as presented. And I hear no objections. Next item is citizens' remarks and comments. Although it's requested that prior notification be given to the city manager or mayor by individuals wishing to address the city council, public comments are always welcome. I ask that you sign up prior to our meeting, and you will be recognized during the citizens' remark section in city council's agenda. During the agenda item, I will ask these guidelines be followed. One, that you stand at the podium and state your name and address for the clerk to record for the record. Make your comments to the council as a whole. Ask that you be brief and state your position and provide facts. Provide written statements and/or supporting materials to the clerk for distribution to council and the city manager. Debate is prohibited. This is a time for us to hear from you, but not to engage in debate. And lastly, ask that you speak clearly, as we want to hear what you have to say. And we typically limit comments to 3 minutes. So with that introduction, I do have one person that's signed up, Mary Beth Majanovic. Did I get it right? No.
Just how it looks, and then you'll get it right, I bet.
So what is it?
Manjarovic.
Manjarovic.
Manjarovic, yes.
Manjarovic, thank you.
Yes, good evening,
Welcome.
everyone. Thank you. My name is Mary Beth Manjarovic. I live at 900 Providence Place. I am just speaking here tonight because of additional information that I feel is relevant to the questions that you posed to us 2 weeks ago regarding the school board. And I'm going to just address a few of the questions directly. Mr. Ayers, you had asked about whether the school board should be an elected position. And I think, as we can all agree, as we're seeing in Richmond, these appointed positions often reflect the views of those in positions of power, and they often lead to growing partisanship. Typically, this results in little accountability for decisions, and it leaves the parents and taxpayers in the dark. We need to give a voice to those parents and taxpayers because they really do have some important things to say. Secondly, Mr. Alligood, you had asked about Governor Youngkin's report on falling test scores and performances. Every educator that I have talked to has seen a drop in performance. And while we all hope it's because of COVID and that we will see a bounce back, we're all also not waiting to see if that's going to be the case. We're making changes. We're trying to increase student performance because that's our job. And that's what we really want, because we want the best for our students. And just today, the Virginia Board of Education also responded to that report, and they said it was a funding problem. So here we have one side saying that it's a standards problem and the other side saying it's a funding problem. And I think this gets to the big issue. That is, there's sides forming. This is the partisanship that doesn't get us anywhere. And what is interesting about that report is nobody seems to be saying that it could be both. It could be standards and funding. It's always seems to be one side against the other. We need to recognize that these are complex issues and stop playing this blame game because our children are the ones that are suffering. Lastly, Mr. Mayor, I will address your question about how we can go about increasing diversity. And I know you were referring specifically to diversity of hires, but I think what we can all agree on is that diversity in all ways is an important component. It's an important component to decision-making. We need to bring in different viewpoints, different backgrounds, different challenges that we face. We all face these different things, and we all need to come together as a community. We need diversity in conversation. We need diversity in decision-making, and we need diversity in the school board. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth, and thank you for sharing those observations and details. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to council this evening? Colette Berry-Reck, step right up. You can state your name and address for the record.
Sign up.
That's okay. No problem.
My name is Colette Berry-Reck. I live at 448 Lime Kiln Road. I just want to say really simple that I think it's fantastic that parents want to be more involved with their children's education, thinking it through, caring about what they learn. I think it's a wonderful step forward. And it just doesn't seem reasonable that a small number of people would appoint someone to the school board when there are all these parents out here that would like to have a say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berry Rec. Appreciate your insights and thank you for being with us this evening. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to council this evening? Yes, ma'am. Welcome. If you also could state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I'm Casey D'Alessandro at 10 Points Place, and I just wanted to say hi in person because I was unable to make our last meeting where you were able to speak directly with the candidates. So I did want to put a face to the name before the vote came today. Thank you for this opportunity to apply for the school board and to be considered for the position. I hopefully would like to bring a unique voice to the school board with my background in engineering and my problem solving abilities. I think that would bring something new to the school board that we already have. So thank you. And again, just wanted to say hello to the council. Thank
Great.
you all.
Casey, thank you for being here. Nice to meet you in person. And thank you for bringing yourself forward for council's consideration. It's a brave thing for citizens to put themselves before city council for the opportunity to serve on any of our boards and commissions, as well as for our city school board. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to council this evening? Hearing crickets, I will close the citizens' remarks and comments and continue on with our agenda. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and there are 3 items for your consideration. And I would ask for council's consideration of those items.
I don't want to take anything off the consent agenda, but I have a question. May I ask a question?
You may.
If there's a street closure that's a private event, not open to the public, who bears the costs that are outlined of police and public works? Just the private citizens that have a private event with a private street closure? Because I do differentiate between a public event that is open to the public.
Right. I'm not sure of our policy on that, and not sure if our staff can respond.
Not sure. I think that'd be a question for Jim.
Yeah. My personal experience from folks that have done in the past is there was no cost to the residents who requested it, and the placing of barriers was very minimal, and there was very limited staff. There was probably more time spent reviewing the event by the police and fire who have approved it than any staff that will be participating. But you raise an incredibly valid point of a public celebration versus street closure versus a private neighborhood street closure.
And that was one of the points raised by our interim city manager on her document that she provided us after her time here on to wrap our arms around street closures, public, private costs. And I agree, this one, there's not great costs. And I have a feeling that the citizens might help with some of the closures with putting barricades out. But just as a matter of policy, a street closure for a private event that's not open to everyone in the city, if we pay those costs so they can have their private event collectively. So, but that aside, I do make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a motion, a second, and with the consent item, there is no discussion. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler.
Aye.
Mr. Ayers.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Ms. Alexander.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. I know we've had discussions in the past about perhaps drawing a line in the sand of programming that's already in place and coming up with a formula for charging new events, because the new 5K, street fair, any number of things, it does get expensive, and not only expensive, but very taxing to our police force, especially during the holiday season. So we may renew that with the city manager when he returns from his vacation. Next item is unfinished business, the appointment of candidates to the Lexington City School Board for two people for 3-year terms that would begin July 1, 2022 and ending June 30, 2025. And I would ask for council's consideration.
For the purposes of discussion, I'd like to move for the reappointment of Tammy Dunn and Tim Diet to the school board, serving terms as described.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and I would ask for council's discussion.
Since I made the motion, I would like to thank each and all of the applicants that have put forward their applications to serve on school board. At the conclusion of the vote, however it turns out, I would encourage all the applicants to continue their engagement with the school board and have and share their concerns and participation in how our schools operate. Related to that, there's been some discussion about the state's disagreement on the causes of the perceived or real declination in our student achievement across our public school system. I wanted to share something that the superintendent sent city council and on the school board last night. She writes, "Good evening, all. I want to share an additional celebration from our school's academic achievements this spring. Attached below, and I will read it, is an excerpt from an email received this afternoon from the director of the CIP school consortium that city schools bring to Lexington City Schools is of 40 plus school districts from across the state who belong to the consortium, which provides districts with opportunities to collaborate on curriculum development, pacing, and benchmark testing, while also providing detailed assessment data reports. A few weeks ago, Dr. Abbott Kesey, principal at Lilburn Downing Middle School, was asked to share instructional strategies for grade 8 writing during a meeting with other district administrators within the consortium, as LDMS was one of the only schools in the consortium to see a gain in writing standards of learning test scores since 2019. It states the following were some of the best outcomes improvements across the entire consortium. Division performance, Lexington City realized a pass rate gain of 2.82 points, and I'm not sure what that means, but the only division in our consortium to post a pass rate gain from 2019 to 2022. And some of that credit goes to Eric Wilson, who was with us earlier, who teaches 8th grade English at Lilburn. I'm also got the long-term sub for him from November 20 to March of 21. And I can tell you during that time, the challenges that the faculty had and the students have, yes, I hear you all. And I think this speaks to the resilience of our faculty and our student body to overcome the barriers that were placed before them during that time, especially in 8th grade English. So I empathize with all the concerns that have been shared about how things were handled during our time with circumstances that could not be foreseen and have not been foreseen. I can say from being in the classroom, we did the best we could with what we had put in front of us. And I'll just leave it with that. But I did want to share Superintendent Walters' comments about the increase in learning achievement that we've had during this time in 8th grade English. Do we still have challenges before us? Of course, I've seen it firsthand. But The good news that is before us, I felt it was imperative to bring forward to the citizenry and to this body.
It's always good news when scores go up. And this particular bit of news is significant since where there are 40 schools in this particular group. And so it's very, very noteworthy. I would like to know what our baseline is. And I noticed that was not in the report in there. And I would just like to see a more thorough piece of information out there. But again, I don't want to take anything away. It was good for scores to go up.
Any further discussion? Ms. Alexander?
Yeah, we might recall that in, I guess, 2018, 19, when we did the appointment, similar to the motion tonight, that the challenge we offered to the school board and the candidates at that time was to see some performance gains in both of our schools. And in addition to the pass rate increases, Waddell was one of the schools in the consortium that realized the SOL pass rate increased also between 19 and 22. So they're getting there.
I'm just going to put aside the test scores because as a parent of an elementary school student and an 8th grader, it's not the highlight of the academic year, preparing for SOLs and taking SOLs, not at all. And quite frankly, a lot of parents despise standardized tests because what it does to the stress levels of elementary school's kids. And so the fact that us parents and us elected leaders and everyone is focused on SOLs, I try to tell my kids, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Do the best that you can. It's not everything. It doesn't define you how you do on one test for 45 minutes or an hour and a half. And so let's not dwell too much on the SOLs. The bottom line is, are our kids progressing? Are they doing well? Are they attending school? Are they moving on from grade to grade? What I hear from our administration and the school board, they of course know, put aside these test scores. They know that challenges have existed, and the budget request this year had additional paraprofessionals to address that. Multiple additional paraprofessionals in multiple areas. So these test scores aside, even if these had us not the tops in the consortium, we've got issues and our administration is facing it. So let's put that aside. And I personally, want to focus on the school board candidates that we have. There's a lot of talk about electing or appointing. Certainly, this is not my favorite thing to do. This is always the meeting each year that I think I look least forward to, because each year that I've been on city council, very qualified people have come forward. Very qualified people. No one can say that we've ever had an unqualified citizen step forward to be appointed to this Lexington City School Board. We are so fortunate. And so we have to make a decision. I take it incredibly seriously. If that job is taken away from me because it happens to be voted on by the citizens and the code of the Virginia or the charter is changed, so be it. And 4,000 voters will have a crack at electing the people that decide to put forth their money and get signatures and get on a ballot. And the people that want to, some say an appointed board makes it more partisan. There's actually, believe it or not, and I can't believe you're going to, I'm going to say this, but some people think elections cause partisanship. So I think you're challenged either way. If you want it to be partisan, it will be partisan. I don't make anyone tell me if they happen to be leaning left or leaning right. I look at what they bring to the school board. And so I am perfectly fine with reappointing Tammy Dunn. She made an excellent point about her term on school board. She was appointed and then COVID hit and she felt like she served an entire term underneath the pandemic, the weight of the pandemic. And Mr. Diet has been the chairperson. He's been an excellent leader. He brings something that none of the other school board members bring. He brings a perspective of having a recent graduate from the high school and a current high school student, something that is incredibly important to me as I now have a high school student. And there's numerous parents in the city that have high school students. And we know we don't have representation on the city school board, on the county school board, but it's important to have our school board know what's going on firsthand, and they have the relationships to ask questions in that school board to school board capacity. Also, Dr. Diet has performed admirably as chairperson. There might be some criticism overall of the school board not being responsive. I'm sure they take that to heart, just like we take that to heart, all criticism. And I'm sure that whether it's something that is fair or not fair, that's how someone felt. And therefore, folks are going to work to make sure that that's not felt in the future. And so I feel confident about that. So I feel very good about Dr. Diet and Ms. Dunn. I feel really good about Mary Beth and Casey. I had an opportunity to speak with Casey yesterday. She called me. I answered my cell phone, not recognizing the number. And then we had a great banter back and forth for 15 or 20 minutes. And it was a pleasure to get to meet you. And thank you for coming forward. So, I kind of said my piece on test scores and our great candidates, but I just think that it's important that the public know how serious we take this responsibility and how fortunate the public is that we have 4 people that are qualified, and we've got to pick 2. We've got to pick 2. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Mr. Ayers.
I'll just say really quickly, this has been a difficult vote for me because I quite frankly, I think Tim and Tammy have done a great job. I think they bring a great deal to our school board. However, I do take the point that it's helpful to have diverse voices and maybe not have monolithic decision-making on the school board. So I hear that. However, I think elected school boards would be a disaster because frankly, there are crackpots both on the right and the left. They're just crazy people out there, and they would wind up on the school board, or they might. And again, it has nothing to do with whether you're on the right or the left. There just are crazy people out there. So I am firmly against making it an elected position. But as far as the other candidates, I hope you will come back. At the next possible appointment. You are being taken seriously for this appointment. It's just that Tim and Tammy are the candidate I think are best to stay on at this point.
Thank you, Dennis.
I just want to add that there are other opportunities that will come around for school board. There are other opportunities that will come around for other boards and commissions. So if your talent is leaning in a particular direction, take a look at what we may have open and possibly put your hat in the ring for that.
And I'll add to that. There is a city council election in the fall, and you have until June 21st at 5 p.m. to get your paperwork in. So, and you may think it's too short a window. Personally, I got my documentation in over the weekend in 2012 when I ran for council last. So you can do it in about 48 to 72 hours if you're really focused on it. But all of those are opportunities to serve our city. I want to express my appreciation for you all coming forward, the role that you play as a parent in our schools, and the role that you play as educators in our community. Grateful to all of you. I think that we do have a reasonably diverse as we can have with 5 members of city school board. When I had the privilege of serving on the school board, I never found it very challenging because there was one question that had to be answered every time for every decision that you made for our children. And that was any decision that you're making as a school board member, any policy that you're making, the question is, how is this in the best interest of our children? And when you can answer that, whether it's disciplining a teacher, a program you don't like, whatever circumstance that somebody may get on their high horse and want to affect a change, it's always not personality driven, but how is that in the best interest for our children, not my child, but all our children, the entire community. that made it a joy for me with every decision that I made in that capacity. So we have a motion and a second, unless there's any further discussion.
I would just like to state again, repeat that I was impressed completely with the incredible talents of all the applicants for it. And again, our problem is you have to pick two. And so don't be discouraged. Come back. There'll be other appointments available.
And there's the next school board seat is June 30 of 2023. There's one seat that'll be available next year. Any further discussion? Hearing none, ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler?
Aye.
Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Again, thank you all for presenting yourselves and for the work before you on the school board. Next item on the agenda is boards and commission reports. Blue Ridge Resource Authority, Mr. Smith.
Blue Ridge Resource Authority met on Monday. The hanging thread before us was the certificate to operate cell 2, which we're anticipating DEQ to sign off earlier. But turns out that DEQ required a letter from the Morris Service Authority that affirms acceptance of leachate for treatment from the BRRA. Why this letter came up now is a good question, because a letter was not required for cell 1 and was likely just an oversight. But now it's not. Through jumping through some hoops and starting some fires, that letter was delivered from the MSA to DEQ today. Hopefully we'll get our CTO to open cell 2 tomorrow. Hopefully. The representative from DEQ is going on vacation on Monday.
So this is a requirement to prove to the state that the MSA has the capacity to handle the leachate or will handle it?
That the MSA will handle and treat the leachate from the landfill, yes.
Right.
But it sounds like it's all been resolved now. It's just a waiting game, and hopefully we will not have to wait very long at all.
The MSA board hasn't met on that yet. And we'll meet at the end of this month.
The fact of the matter is that MSA is already treating leachate from the landfill. This is just a letter affirming that they're doing what they're doing.
And there was some concern about how much leachate there was as well. So was there some quantities associated with that letter? Do you know?
The quantity that was resolved finally, the engineering report and the estimate finally from the director of the landfill was about 25,000 gallons per day, which is roughly four tank loads. Considering that the MSA has the capacity to treat 3 million gallons per day of influent, 25,000 gallons a day is not a huge increase on that.
As I recall, just saying, there was some issue about the quality of the leachate and what it did to the bugs at the MSA plant.
Correct. I think that the hanging or the biggest problem right now is the leachate that is being treated by the MSA is the ultraviolet transmissivity, which allows the UVs to get into the treatment water to kill the stuff that's finally released. And how we resolve that is I think a bigger question at this point. End of report.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Smith. Main Street Lexington, Ms. Strawn.
Main Street Lexington met on Tuesday, June 14th, and the Economic Vitality Committee met today. Rock the Bridge was a great success. About 600 people enjoyed a very fun evening. Main Street Lexington received a grant from the Carillion Rockbridge Community Hospital Foundation for our Partnering for a Vibrant Downtown Wayfinding Program, events and projects. And Main Street's collaborating with tourism on the Downtown Wayfinding Project. You know, I've been talking about this, Economic Vitality has been working on it, and lo and behold, we find out that tourism's working on a similar project. Obviously, theirs is covering County, Lexington, and Buena Vista, but there's definitely some good synergy there. So we are working with them to see how we can work together and benefit so that the project benefits both groups and the whole community. And mark your calendars for the Freedom Food Festival on July 3rd and the Children's Bike Parade on July 4th. The Freedom Food Festival will be the city's first use of the special events ABC permit. And for the bike parade, decorating starts at 10 a.m. at the hub and the parade begins at 11 a.m. And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Don't hear any questions. Thank you, Ms. Strawn. Planning Commission.
Planning Commission met on Thursday, June 9th, and we continued our discussion on the zoning ordinance amendment for planned unit developments for mixed use. And that's all I have.
We'll advertise that Planning Commission is, we anticipate a vacancy with Jamie Gooden, who is rolling off at the end of June.
Right.
So anyone who's interested in the Planning Commission, would love for them to apply. Regional Tourism Board.
Thanks. The board met on June 8th and at that time approved our fiscal year 23 budget. And we also approved a $200 reimbursement for Washington Lee's community-based learning to cover some of their costs in the production of the Black-owned businesses interactive map that Dr. Goluboff and her students produced in partnership with tourism. And the understanding is that $200 could then be reallocated by CBL to help defray the cost of the Juneteenth event in Richardson Park. The board would normally have met yesterday, but needed to reschedule because staff has been busy this week hosting 8 travel writers, editors, and TV producers for the first of 3 media tours. The content creators arrived on Tuesday and leave tomorrow. And tonight, I believe the entire group is having dinner in Lexington at Haywoods. Leslie has already spoken of the Freedom Food Fest, but actually, tourism has been heavily promoting their Wanderlove Rocking Rockbridge Summer 6, which covers the 6 events planned in our region around Independence Day weekend, the Freedom Food Fest and the bike race being one of them. The others just want to mention are the Brownsburg Garden Tour on July 2nd, the Balloons Over Rockbridge event on July 2nd and 3rd, the Chris Knight concert at Lime Kiln Theater on July 2nd, the Music and Fireworks event in Buena Vista's Glenmorey Park on July 4th. And one more thing about the Freedom Food Fest, if you are interested in purchasing advanced meal tickets or reserving a private table for 8, visit the lexingtonvirginia.com website. And finally, Chuck may have some more information about this, but Rockbridge Outdoors, I heard in collaboration with the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation, has received a $27,000 grant from Carillion's Community Health Foundation. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, or?
You mean the track trails program?
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I mentioned this to the chamber board meeting yesterday. They asked me as a representative from Rockbridge Outdoors to talk about that. And one of the highlights was the grant from the Rockbridge Community Health Foundation to support the Track Trails program. Track Trails is a youth oriented and focused outreach to get kids involved in doing trails during travels or locally. And at the Track Trails kiosk, there's a QR code and you scan it and then you log it. And then when you have so many trails accomplished, then you get some sort of a prize or recognition. But the 3 placements of Track Trails, there are Track Trails already installed out at Natural Bridge at the Blue Ridge Trail and the Skyline Trail. the 3 trails in Rockbridge. One installation will be at Marl Creek up at McCormick Farm. The second is a trail system off the double-decker pavilion at Glenmorey Park. And the third is on the Chessie Trail. I think the kiosk will be, I think, at Lime Kiln Park. So that was a nice little feather for the Rockbridge Outdoors program to get that program successfully awarded. Also related to that, there's a disc golf foundation that is funding disc golf cages and course installation at Natural Bridge. So, and speaking of Natural Bridge, since we're on the subject, I gave everybody a Friends of Natural Bridge rack card you can hang on to, look at, and give to your friends after you finish reading it. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about that, Dennis.
Thank you, Chuck. It's good to delegate your report. So that's
And a friendly reminder, they make Friends of Natural Bridge membership makes a great Father's Day present just around the corner. So something to think about, as well as birthday presents, anniversary presents, whatever celebration you may have. Raro, Mr. Ziegler.
No report.
Thank you, sir. Threshold, Ms. Alexander.
No report.
Thank you, ma'am. Maury Service Authority, Mr. Alligood.
No report.
Very good. Thank you. Under the mayor's report, I've been threatening to bring forward appointments for your consideration. And I think just for ease, I'm going to mention all of these. And if you have any objections, we can pull it out, but I'll share with you the friends and neighbors who have agreed to support our city in different boards and commissions. And then we'll have a vote on all of them at the end. For the Architectural Review Board, Julie Goyette would like to continue to serve effective July 1, 2022, 4-year term that ends in June 30, 2026, as well as Barbara Crawford for the same time period. For the Board of Building Code Appeals, Keith Holland would like to continue to serve, and it would be effective July 1, 2022 and ending June 30, 2026, also a 4-year term. Under the Board of Equalization, you may recall that's a 1-year term beginning July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30, 2023. And Astrika Adams, Camille Miller, and Albert Vargas have agreed to serve in that capacity. Next, we have the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is a 5-year term starting July 1, 2022 and ending June 30, 2027. And Ross Waller has agreed to serve in that capacity. For the Community Services Board, James Gira would like to continue to serve. And it is a 3-year term that begins effective immediately and would end December 31st, 2024. The Library Board, Joe Kalis is moving from Lexington, and his term is scheduled to end June 30. And Margaret Kirkby has applied, and the Library Board would love for her to serve a 4-year term effective July 1 through June 30, 2026. And lastly, Ned Reister on the Maury Service Authority, who's been serving a number of terms. He has agreed and would like to continue serving, and he currently serves as the chair of the MSA, 4-year term effective July 1 and ending June 30, 2026. And I bring all of those to your attention and ask for your consideration of all of those.
I move that we appoint your list for the different boards as stated.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
The Building Code of Appeals Board, how many people serve on that?
Do you know, Arnie?
I'm just
Look it
curious.
up.
No, I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, it's 5, 3 were appointed by Lexington, 2 by BV, and we did it on a staggered scale or staggered initial terms.
Right.
So that's why Mr. Holland had, I think, the shortest term to begin with. But it's 5 total, 3 were appointed by the city of Lexington.
And it's a regional, it's a
Joint,
appeal.
it's a
Okay.
joint Building Code of Appeals Board between the city of Lexington and the city of Buena Vista.
Okay. I was, because Keith lives in the county, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I was just.
Yep.
Wanted to get that clarified. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm not able to find it here quickly.
The other two members are Skip Ravenhorst and Fred Kirchner.
For city
Correct.
of Lexington.
That are our appointees.
Correct.
Yes.
Very good. Have a motion, a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Ayers.
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Ms. Alexander.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all very much. And with my report, other item that I would like to just pass along. I'm mindful as I go down our streets and they're safe and clear for the most part of debris of neighbors putting trees and items out of their yard, all gets collected. And it's been hotter than Hades this week, but just really proud of Public Works and the things that they do to keep our city so attractive. Again, tree removals, the care of the streets, and certainly the flags that get put up for different events. There was some requests by a couple of citizens to, perhaps put the flags up for, I think, Flag Day, or actually Memorial Day, and keep them up through 4th of July. And staff, Public Works said it's not that difficult to place the flags, and frequently they'll get wrapped around in a windstorm or something of that nature. So taking them down, it adds an extra pop to the city. So we think about putting up for an extended period of time, but putting it up for the events and honoring our country for the different holidays is still our policy. If we have some special events, I hope if the president or vice president comes to town again, that we will put our flags up. We didn't do that when the vice president came last, but welcome that input from citizens. And that's the reason that we don't keep them up for an extended period of time for those curious minds. And unless there are any questions, that's the end of my report. And I would say there's no report from our city manager. I'm sure he's having a blast in Europe and look forward to his return. Calling the city attorney.
Just one item tonight. Chief Green has asked me to review the noise ordinance based on citizens' complaints and her perception that the current ordinance is difficult to enforce and is sort of putting her officers in a bit of a awkward position in some cases. So our noise ordinance was most recently amended in 1974. So I think it's ripe for review, and we'll have a proposal for y'all to consider maybe one of the meetings in August, certainly by September.
Thank you, sir.
Just to comment further on the noise ordinance, few years ago, I presented a noise ordinance. Perhaps Arnie could pull that out of the inner sanctum somewhere and put it back on the table.
I also hope that you have a copy of that. Because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find it, but I can certainly look.
I'll look for it.
Yeah, I would say if you're eager for the city attorney to consider it, if you could supply it to him, that would be preferable.
Will do.
1974, there was like a famous W&L grad that year that they probably had to change the noise ordinance after that year, Mr. Harwood.
Just a quick piece of trivia. The noise issue in Virginia in part came about, there was a case at Virginia Beach, perhaps you'll learn about that, where the city of Virginia Beach lost.
Yeah, that's one of the issues. I think that was around 2009 with that case that held that was unenforceable. So since that point, there's really been a bifurcation between municipalities that are dead set on decibel meters and sort of a objective standard problem with that is the decibel meters. There are specific regulations that were put in 2010 where they have to be calibrated multiple times a year. They all have to be consistent. Ends up being a managerial and logistical problem as well as an expense. So that's
There was, just to put another dot on that, one of the things that I learned in doing the research for it was that the phones, you could download an app and it would read the decibels. And there was a comparison made as to which ones were more accurate.
the issue with that, and that probably gives you a reasonable estimate, but the state, in response to that Virginia Beach case, came in and put in specific standards that of how the decibel meters need to be designed, built, calibrated. So the apps aren't admissible in court. Anything you would bring in as a sort of, I've used this app as a decibel meter, isn't admissible evidence unless, because the decibel meter to be considered evidence has to meet the certification requirements in the state code.
But you could use the phone as a preliminary indicator and then finish it off with the correct meter.
Right. Or the other route that you can take is to have sort of a reasonable standard of something that is obviously audible from the property boundary and the contours around that and how that's defined. That's going to be my suggestion for the way to go, is just ignore the decibel meter path based on all those difficulties. And the issue is then the credibility of the officers testifying, which I've got no problem with that. I'd much rather go with that than a decibel meter on an app.
So what did Virginia Beach end up resolving and doing?
That's a good question. I'll need to look and see specifically what Virginia Beach passed in response to that.
So I don't think Virginia Beach gave up.
I'll look into that.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Were the noise complaints about music, loud cars, engine brakes?
Noise, essentially a gathering, private gathering. No sort of commercial activity, no jake breaks or anything like that. It was, I think, a party disturbance in a neighborhood.
If your home is located adjacent to a fraternity house, the fraternity may get loud at times. So, but every citizen certainly has the right to relative peace and solitude. But I'm always hopeful that neighbors can work out any differences and that it doesn't come to the police needing to mediate or rule. Love to see their efforts and energies focused on more positive circumstances, but they're certainly there to support the neighbors and everyone in our community.
Well, hasn't it been the case in Lexington that it's always been a subjective interpretation on the part of the police department concerning noise?
Well, the current ordinance is sort of unclear in terms of where that would actually fit into the analysis after that Supreme Court case. And that's what I think it makes sense to essentially just repeal what's on there and come in with a new ordinance that addresses specifically that Supreme Court case.
I'll see if I can dig it up.
Be great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for the city attorney? Hearing one, I'm not aware of any new business and I'm not aware of any closed meetings. So unless there's any other business to come before council, we will stand adjourned. Thank you all for being with us this evening and have a great weekend. And even better, 4th of July, the Freedom Food Fest, the bike parade, not race, Dennis. I think you said race. So